Hello and welcome. I'm William Bain, the Head of Trade Policy at British Chambers of Commerce, and welcome to our webinar today, Unlock Global Markets, Mastering International Trade and E-Commerce, supported by our friends at DHL. Well, we've got some great contributors who are going to share their insights and experience and outline the opportunities of how we can all grow our business in terms of e-commerce. Just some initial context about the importance of this. In terms of goods and services, e-commerce is an expanding and indeed is the real growth sector in terms of driving global exports over the next years. At BCC, we're involved in urging the negotiations through the World Trade Organization, which we hope will result in an agreement that eases and promotes and facilitates e-commerce across the globe, bringing in those high growth areas of the world, including the Far East and also the developing world as well. And I think having that type of agreement would be a massive boost to e-commerce. And our panelists today will talk about how big a boost there can be and the practical measures that you can take to grow your business by e-commerce means. Let me say that this webinar is going to be recorded, so you can watch it at your leisure when it's most convenient, and also bear that in mind in terms of the questions being submitted. So I'm delighted to welcome our two discussants today, Kerry Croft, who's the UK Business Development Manager at DHL. She has more than 10 years of experience in the e-commerce sector, helping to support and grow some of the largest e-commerce customers on a global scale. And also delighted to be joined by Kieran Burke, who's COO and co-founder of Swoop Finance. Kieran began his career at KPMG, and he founded Swoop with his partner in 2018. And Swoop is a platform which helps businesses secure finance across debt, equity, and grants. It helps them make savings on everyday business costs, and it's helped over 150,000 SMEs secure over 2 billion euros in financing across its businesses in the UK, Ireland, Canada, US, Australia, and South Africa. So a couple of stellar contributors to share their expertise on e-commerce today. So I want to thank our partner, DHL, for making this webinar possible. We will have time for a few questions at the end of this webinar. Please submit via the Q&A function via Zoom. And without further ado, I would like to invite Kerry to give her keynote presentation.
Perfect. Okay, so thank you so much for having me. As you said, I'm from DHL, so I'm the Business Development Director here for DHL Express UK. And I have a team of e-commerce international experts that work under me that help small brands, so all the way from startups right to some of the biggest corporations that we have in the UK in expanding globally. So today I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of the global e-commerce marketplace and the opportunities that lie outside of the UK with exporting your goods and services outside of the UK. And I'll also give you some practical tips as well that, again, has helped some of our biggest customers grow to the heights that they have on an international scale. If we think about e-commerce, right, it's been around for more than 10 years now, which is really interesting, and it continues to be one of the fastest growing verticals in selling goods. And if we think about some of those trends that are always there, that are still apparent to this day about consumers wanting everything on demand. I know when I purchase clothing or anything like that from a retailer, you know, you're wanting to look at when is it going to be with me? How long am I going to have to wait for it? And you want everything now. And in the UK, we're extremely lucky with all of the brands that we have at our fingertips and almost at a next day delivery. But thinking about some of the consumers you potentially might be selling to at the other side of the world, for example, in Australia, the US, etc., that could be waiting more than 7 days for their delivery. So you want to be able to capture those customers. Information being readily available, right? We see customers using websites and using technology more and more to understand actually is the product that they're buying something that they want to have and want to use. They're checking reviews, they're checking social media, they're looking at is there trusted people and reviews for that purchase that they're going to make. So again, thinking about some of the things that can lead up to that purchase for your consumers. They're looking for personalization and they're looking for sustainable solutions. So it's more and more apparent that consumers are thinking about the environment when they're shopping, especially in some of the segments like fast fashion, for example. We're seeing a lot of brands doing a lot more for the environment and revolutionizing their supply chain by becoming more sustainable. And at DHL, we have ways to help customers with that as well that we can talk about. And looking at the experience to get those sales, right? We don't want customers to come onto a website, purchase one thing, and then never shop with you again. It's not like a store, right? Where you would have a customer coming in. If they weren't happy with the product, you'd be telling a person there and then what was wrong with it or that you weren't happy with the service. But customers are reluctant to do that online. They don't want to leave reviews. They don't want to have to get in contact with you. So it's really important that you create a customized experience for each of your consumers so that they become a repeated customer and a long time customer for you. If we take a look at the expanding marketplace, right, we have a couple of countries that I've picked out that we see as some fantastic markets that our biggest customers are growing into for e-commerce customers. So if you look at the UK, right, we see a lot of startups, a lot of SMEs just shipping in the UK, potentially because it might be scary to go outside of the UK. They might not have the understanding of what regulations there are, customs and duties, etc. So it can be a little bit scary when you are starting your business and you're trying to branch out. Well, how do you do it? We can talk to you a little bit about that. But first, for me, it's all about that expanding marketplace, right? So in the UK, we've got 53 million shoppers online. That's about 89% of our total population. But you can see in some of the other countries, for example, in the US, for example, that have over 219 million shoppers online. They're looking to buy products from UK brands. We've got the EU, for example. So we have 553 million people shopping online in the European Union, and 51% of those are buying outside of Europe. That's a huge market and a lot of people that you can capture by just having those options on your website to be able to access customers that might be shopping on your website. So, for example, you would want to open up your website to over the 220 countries and territories so that no matter where your customer is on, maybe they found you on social media, maybe they've come across you on a Google search, for example, they've landed on your website, the last thing you want to do is to let them not purchase. So just opening up that website and then looking at your marketing strategies on how you can grow further into some of those markets. So for me, if you look at the amount of shoppers and the amount of cross-border buyers just on these 5 countries outside of the UK, it's 10 times the amount of people you could reach than just the UK alone. So for me, having those options on your website, let the customers shop from wherever they are in the world, and you're off to a really, really great start. Why would you actually ship internationally? Well, if the number of people in those markets doesn't interest you enough, let's look at some of the statistics that are backing that up, right? We see cross-border consumers are spending 17% more to a UK customer alone. Us in the UK, I'm guilty of it. I'll buy one thing at a time. I might buy something from a retailer one week and then might repurchase with them in 3 weeks' time. But I'm not putting enough in my basket to warrant that big delivery. Whereas when you're shipping outside of the UK, it's got further travel time in terms of delivery. Your customers are trying to buy from a UK brand, so they want to maximize their sales. So we see that cross-border purchases are more than 17% higher because of that reason. We've got countries that are really easy to start with. So if shipping to 220 countries does scare you, don't worry. There is a couple of really good ones that are beneficial to just kick off with. So, for example, Australia, the US, they have really high de minimis values. So that means that that is the value of which duty is charged after that certain value. So, for example, in the USA, anything under $800 that your customer purchases from you will have no duties and taxes on it. That makes it really attractive and really easy for a US consumer to buy from a UK brand. But not only that, the returns rates of shipments is also a lot less than the UK. I don't know if you've seen in the news, but there's been some businesses that have been having some returns issues, etc., and people buying a lot of products and returning most of them as well. When you're shipping internationally, consumers are making that purchase and that they're making an informed purchase. They're not going to buy 10, 12 things and return 10 of them back to you. They're buying the goods that they want and they're more likely to keep them because of that travel distance. So again, really important and a fantastic thing about shipping outside of the UK. But how do you open that website up being international? So we have what's called a website health check. This was facilitated by DHL Express a couple of years ago, but it was driven by our biggest retailers that we work with. We went to them and said, when you went outside of the UK, what issues did you come across? What barriers to cross-border e-commerce were there? And how did you overcome them? We now use this website health check with all of our customers to help aid international expansion for e-commerce websites. Some of them you might be looking at that you might be thinking, that's really easy. How would that impact my conversion rates? Well, some of them are very easy, yet quite a lot of businesses in the UK still don't do some of these simple things. It's actually 46% of e-commerce businesses right now don't even ship outside of the UK. So it's really important that you look at some of these points and adapt them to your website. So for example, just telling your customers that you have international shipping on your homepage or worldwide delivery. Perhaps you've got it on your social media websites as well. We're seeing a lot more brands putting worldwide shipping in the bio of their Instagrams to make it clear to that international buyer that you are open for business. They don't have to go through all of your website, put things in their basket, only to get to the checkout and realize that you don't ship to their country. Making it really clear allows them to just go straight into that buying process with you. And do you have a clear delivery information page, right? So again, for us here in the UK, our slowest delivery, our standard deliveries here, if we want something, is about 5 days. It's not that long to wait. But if you think about if you're ordering from Australia, for example, that standard delivery could be up to 3 weeks plus. Are consumers going to wait up to 3 weeks to have a delivery? Probably not. As I said on that first slide, everyone wants everything on demand. So making sure that you are having the delivery information page really clear so that that customer can see exactly what that means for their country. Is there a standard delivery option? Is there an express option if they need something quicker? Just giving that customer those flexible options makes it open to your website and prevents people from bouncing because the option they want isn't there. Duties and taxes, I mentioned that on a couple of slides ago as well. So duties and taxes is really important. Over 80% of people don't want any surprise charges. Now, I don't know if you've shopped from any brands outside of the UK, but I had one recently where I purchased from a European brand. I'd spent over €150 and I got a bill for duties and taxes before it could get delivered to me. Now, that really interrupted my delivery experience. And I was, got my notification and it wouldn't be delivered until I'd paid that. It wasn't a great experience because I wish the retailer had just told me about it before. So giving those customers those options that, by the way, there might be duties and taxes on your order, then potentially this is how much it will cost. Do you want to pay it now? That's a much better option to be able to give customers to be able to make sure that they convert on your website. We've got a couple of other points on here as well about localization, right? Local payment options, local currency, local language. That's the kind of next step in terms of localizing your websites to ensure that no matter where a customer is coming on to, that it is open for business. So for example, there's quite a lot of different payment options. For instance, in the UK, we tend to use PayPal, Apple Pay, and credit and debit cards. But for some countries, for example, in the Netherlands, Ideal is their number one payment option. And if you don't have Ideal on your website, 90% of Netherlands customers want to pay with those options. So thinking about that in the buying process, has there ever been a time when you've purchased on a website and the options that you wanted to pay with weren't there and you just came off of the website? Think about that when you're going through your own website and how a consumer would actually think about it. International returns is a really important one. So again, we see a lot of retailers taking care of those UK customers and giving them a returns policy, but then there's no returns policy for international customers. If you're a new brand, if you're up and coming, if you've just went viral on TikTok or Instagram, and people are potentially hesitant to offer and to order from you, or might not have ordered from a UK brand before, you want to give them that option to be able to return. Give them that trust that you're so trustworthy in your product that you know that if they want to return it, you've got those options and it's not going to be a difficult process. Now, notice we say easy and not free. So again, UK retailers are coming away from free returns, and international customers do expect to pay for a return, but making it easy so that they have those options that you can provide, whether it's a label or a QR code, for example, that they can return those back to the UK and get a refund for that. Sustainability that I spoke about. So again, looking at sustainability, what are you doing in sustainability, not just on delivery, but in terms of your whole supply chain, and are you telling your customers about it? Is it clear on your website? And also, do you take on board that customer's feedback, right? So again, making sure that if you are on some of those review platforms, Google perhaps, people, Trustpilot, etc., make sure you're checking in with your customers. What are they saying about their experience? And particularly, what are they doing about delivery? Because again, that's something that you as a retailer can't control. That's in the hands of us, carriers like us at DHL, where we want to make sure that that delivery experience is as smooth as possible. And the last one then is all about the rise of social commerce then. So again, I've mentioned that Instagram, that TikTok, perhaps you aren't currently selling on any of the Instagram or TikTok or social media platforms, but we're seeing that this is becoming a really, really big thing. So it's actually growing faster than traditional B2C. So you can see here in the compound growth, it's growing at plus 30% all the way up to 2030. We're seeing more and more customers feeling okay with purchasing on social media, and they're doing it more and more. So it's really important that not only do you have a strategy for your social media platforms, but you're venturing into how to actually use that platform to sell as well. So where your customers are on, they're seeing your products on influence perhaps, they might be seeing it on a review of someone that's done on your product. Let them purchase on those platforms as well, and that will just help you be able to grow on that as well. We've seen the rise of live shopping in China. They've really adopted live stream shopping. And again, that's becoming more and more apparent with the likes of TikTok, for example, where we've got TikTok Live, where again, we're having retailers that are capturing customers all over the world and reaching new customers that they potentially might not have thought of before. We've got last one then, we have a QR code here. Again, we've got the recording, so you'll have it afterwards anyway, but this is our dhl.com Discover website. If you scan that QR code, it is a host of not only B2C information, but B2B as well, and all about tips on how you can grow internationally as well. So I look forward to your questions at the end, and I hope you enjoyed. Over to you, William. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Kerry. Kerry, if I can just ask you a couple of questions that come from that presentation there. So firstly, I mean, what projections does DHL have about the potential growth in global e-commerce trade over the next decade? And which are the kind of markets and countries which companies should really have an eye on if they are looking to expand their exporting capacity?
Yep. So yeah, global e-commerce is continuing to grow. It's growing at 25%. So by 2026, it'll be worth 8.1 trillion. Now, if we looked at that number a few years ago, when we last looked at how fast global e-commerce was growing, it was predicted to be 900 billion by 2026. So you can see the massive jump in that short space of period as well, where it's growing. And we're not seeing anything that's saying that that won't continue to grow, especially now that some of those emerging markets are coming up, that are willing and have the technology to get online and purchase from UK brands. So I think, I mean, from what I said before, I would always tell any retailer that we work with to just add the options onto your website to go to any country in the world. Because as I say, you don't know who potentially might be reaching your website, even though you might not be doing a marketing campaign to those countries. But some of the ones that we're seeing that are coming into our kind of top lanes, for example, are the likes of Mexico. Mexico has been a real fast growth lane for e-commerce retailers this year. Again, that's mostly due to the rise of more and more people having access and being able to shop online on there. So again, that's a real big one in Latin America as a whole. South Korea is another one. Again, really liking UK brands right now. We're seeing that, especially in the fashion industry, that customers are shopping from South Korea for UK brands, and also the Middle East as well. So again, with currency, etc., with brands that we have here in the UK, and that Britishness that a lot of international customers love, is why some of those markets are growing for us on there. You know, as I said, your easy markets, I would say, in terms of the kind of English-speaking countries as well, are your US and Australia. So I'd kind of say those kind of five are the ones to really watch out for.
Amazing, really interesting that, because of course some of the trade negotiations that the UK has got underway at the moment are with exactly some of those countries that you mentioned. And you know, what British Chambers has been saying, and many other businesses as well, is, you know, let's try and get as strong provisions on digital trade in those agreements as we can to really turbocharge e-commerce. So that is good news if those markets are indeed the ones to watch. Great. Now, Kerry, I know in my own life, I am increasingly doing shopping via social media apps, you know, Instagram, X, Facebook. I've not quite yet tried TikTok. I must try that. But is there a specific strategy which companies now need to accentuate their sales via social media?
I think, first of all, I think it's just being on those platforms. Again, we see still quite a lot of companies that aren't on those platforms or selling on them. So I think you've got the kind of bigger brands who have had a social media strategy in place for a number of years now in terms of the rise of social commerce. So the first thing I would say is just to have some of those shops. So having an Instagram shop, having a Facebook, advertising on Facebook, and having a TikTok shop, or being able to offer those sorts of products to customers. So it's just opening social media for now, right? And having that brand story. So again, we're seeing a lot of the brands that are doing really well are the ones that are creating a community type based community for their consumers, right? So it's not just we only talk to you about selling products, right? It's all about the brand, the story, what are we doing, you know, taking behind the scenes pictures in your warehouse, or, you know, at your design process. Customers are really interested in the brand story as a whole. And I'd say the retailers that are nailing that aspect, the sales are then following on from that.
Fantastic, thank you. Remember, keep those questions coming in from our participants who are watching live. Just one request that's come in, we can do this really at the end, just to reshare the QR code. So we'll do that before this webinar finishes. So if I can now turn to Kieran, welcome, thank you so much for joining us. If I can start perhaps by asking you to think about and address what you would say are the most common forms of finance that e-commerce companies seek to utilize.
For sure. So the most popular form is probably revenue-based finance, and it really kind of rose during COVID when there was a real explosion in e-commerce and hyper growth. How revenue-based finance works is the lender will look at what your annual revenue is, or your annual revenue, and what your average monthly revenue is. And then what they'll do is they'll advance you either that average monthly amount or a multiple of that monthly amount. So say you're selling shoes and you do about £40,000 of sales a month, a revenue-based finance provider will advance you maybe 40,000 or two times your average revenue, maybe 80,000. And then how you pay that back is you pay a percentage of it out of your sales. So you might pay 10% of your sales back until it's paid down plus interest. Usually those revenue finance facilities are structured over 3, 6, 9, 12, maybe 15 months. So what you see a lot of e-commerce businesses using them for is for a stock run. So we're in the summer months now, so people are thinking about Black Friday, Christmas. So a lot of people will be using those kind of e-commerce facilities to increase their stock orders to maximize out on a kind of a growth period for the business. And I would say, though, it's interesting to see kind of the evolution of those revenue-based financing facilities. So a lot of the major players in the e-commerce space, Shopify, Amazon, Stripe, they all have their own kind of Stripe Capital, Shopify Capital. So many of the viewers may have come across them before. But they do come with some limitations. So I mentioned that the business owners kind of usually get access to them over a short-term period, 3, 6, 9, 12. So there can be very good for kind of a short-term fix or to do a specific action like purchase more stock. But because they have to repay it in quite a quick period of time, they can often be very cyclical. So which cannot always be great from a cash flow perspective. So what we often see as e-commerce businesses mature, start to grow out their business, then sometimes they might outgrow a revenue-based finance facilities and look to structure something over a longer term period, which gives them better control over the monthly cash flow. But certainly kind of, I would say the most popular within in the e-commerce space is revenue-based financing.
Great, thank you. Now, Kieran, what are some of the pitfalls that e-commerce companies can run into with traditional forms of e-commerce finance, and how is your company working with business to try and overcome those?
Yeah, so I think talking into a little bit of what I was saying at the end there, it's really important to understand what your monthly cash flow is as a business. I think just generally, not just in e-commerce, because it really helps you with your decision making when it comes to financing. Because a lot of those e-commerce finance facilities are so easy, the way Stripe or Shopify, they put them in your face, and it's very easy, just click to download. It couldn't be more easy to get that cash into your bank relative to what we all experience around access to finance over the last number of years, and e-commerce businesses are kind of at an advantage relative to other businesses because it's really embedded into their ecosystem and into their day-to-day lives. So with that in mind, I think it's really important for them to understand, how does the repayment structure look like? Can they work with their margins? Because as we all know, e-commerce businesses can be very tight margin businesses, a lot of exposure to FX and exposure to kind of delivery and time. So margins are super, super important. So it's really, really important that they think through, if a business is sweeping 10, 20% of my future sales over a certain period of time, can I afford to take that on? And in some cases, naturally, a lot of business owners are kind of quite pro risk, myself included. So you naturally be like, yeah, of course I'm going to make those sales. So sometimes it doesn't all work out, and that's where you might see the pitfalls. But that's not to say all is lost. So I think what is important then is to look outside of, say, traditional e-commerce funding for facilities that can be used over a longer period of time. And they may not be able to access them within the 48-hour period that e-commerce financing allows. But what it would do is allow to structure that cash flow over a much longer period. So instead of repaying back over 6 or 9. You could pay back even over a 24 or a 60-month period, and all of a sudden what you're working with from a monthly cash flow perspective changes exponentially, and gives the business a lot more optionality when it comes to cash flow. But what we often see is if they do get into a pitfall, there is kind of things that they consider and use in terms of their day-to-day lives to help with that cash flow scenario. One thing we often see is around VAT funding. So often we might get into the new year and there's a larger than expected VAT payment due for that business. So what that business can often do is, instead of having to pay it all at once to HMRC, they can spread that over a 3-month period. So again, reducing that kind of initial cash flow gap that may have presented itself. So not generally speaking about just about the kind of revenue mix of the business, there are other elements within the business that can be used or leveraged to help a cash flow if an e-commerce business goes into a pitfall or kind of hairy moment within their business lives.
Great. Now, what considerations would you say are important for e-commerce business owners to think through when they're selecting financing options for their business?
Yeah, so I think understanding again just the cash flow cycle of their business, because often in terms of how long does it take to purchase your goods, how long to what the stock that you're about to sell, how long does it take to come in, how long do your sales take to clear. So it's really, really important to think about the cash flow cycle of the business, because so many business owners will go into their accountancy software and just look at the accountancy system and get up the P&L, which is definitely a reflection of the business. But the most important reflection of the business is actually what's in the bank account and what my cash flow cycle is, and how long it takes in terms of days for people to pay me or for my supply chain to arrive. So really understanding that will help you make better decisions around which financing product you need and why. Also understanding things around securitization is super important. So we're now in an age where there's never been more financing options out there, which is great in some respects. As a business owners, you've never had more choice. But at the same time, most business owners aren't from financing background. They go in, they do things because they're passionate about what they do, not necessarily because they took an accountancy degree. So it's okay to not know finance inside out and not to be intimidated by it, but do take time to understand it, particularly around things like securitization. So what I mean by securitization, sometimes a lender or facility will require personal guarantee. So what does that mean relative to myself? Or if they're looking for securitization over stock, asset, property, again, what does that mean? What does that mean to my business? Or in some cases, it will be unsecured. So having that understanding of what securitization means before going in to a decision around access to finance, around what products to take, allow you to navigate the system a lot better, because you kind of understand what you're comfortable with and what you'd like to go for. But ultimately, there is a lot more options available than say what the ones were 5 years ago or even 10 years ago, which is a good thing. But it is important to understand, I would say, cash flow cycle and your understanding of securitization before going into any lending or credit facility.
Fantastic. Remember, for our participants, please, this is your opportunity to ask questions to our experts. If you have any questions, please just pop them in the Q&A function when you're watching this webinar, if you're watching it live. And whatever your question, our panel will be able to address it. So please get those questions coming in. Perhaps just something for me to address on behalf of BCC is, this is a very interesting sort of global scenario to navigate and needs all kinds of engagement. So obviously we have tens of thousands of members who are engaging in e-commerce on a daily basis, and at different tiers of government, both in the UK and globally, there are issues that have to be addressed. So just some things to kind of watch for in the future. The EU is involved in a review of its VAT legislation, its customs legislation. So if you're interested in importing into that market, exporting into that market, then keep an eye on what's happening in Brussels. Look particularly at what happens to things like the de minimis threshold. Will there still be one for EU customs, or a real issue for debate at the moment? So that's something that may affect your ability to send goods duty-free and relatively cost-free to that market. Also, initiatives like single trade window, single customs window will be very important in digitalizing a lot of these border processes, potentially enabling you to get your goods into customers in another market on a far speedier basis. So we're engaging with the UK government in terms of the Borders 2025 agenda through Cabinet Office and HMRC. We work very much hand in glove with our peer chambers of commerce across the European neighbourhood to ensure that, as a third country, that our issues are at least ventilated in Brussels, and these big regulatory dossiers are being considered. We also have close relations with US chambers of commerce as well. And obviously, we want to see, in terms of free and open trade, as much of that agenda being carried through as possible to increase growth in both of our markets. And we're also working with our relatively new partners in some of the agreements like CPTPP, which the UK has ratified. Other members of that are ratifying it too, likely to come on stream for UK companies by the end of this year, to look at that big growth market in the Indo-Pacific region as well, and speaking with the embassies, speaking with governments in that 12-strong bloc now, to look at the opportunities for UK companies. So quite a diverse range of engagements that the BCC does, but with that one aim, that e-commerce is undoubtedly the future, and both in the bilateral arrangements we have with other countries and what we do through the World Trade Organization, we need to emphasize and grow e-commerce. So that's really our key aim for a lot of our policy and engagement work. Great. Well, we now have some questions coming in. So if I can maybe put this one to Kieran first of all. So the questioner is saying, where do you get mentors who can help kickstart an e-commerce initiative, especially with getting to work, identifying suppliers in China, or any low-cost locations like those? So they should mentorship and getting started, Kieran.
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think it's super important to try get those competitive edges when you start off, and I think it can be challenging, particularly for UK business owners, given how the trade set up between UK and EU. So how can you start to get those competitive advantages? And I think it's really important that you start to join networks like your local chamber or any network center, because that's where you'll get that intelligence and knowledge. I think just flipping into access to finance for a second, but you'll follow my trail of thought. There's a wonderful scheme called the Startup Loan Scheme. It's a government-backed initiative in the UK that allows business owners to be able to get access to up to £25,000 in the first 3 years of trading at a flat rate of 6%. It can be spread across 5 years. So it's a really great entry point product. But to give you an example of a network that run that through, Virgin have a not-for-profit community to help early stage business owners be able to access that financing, and then put a kind of a digital community together with support structures in place, whether it's around marketing or insights. I even know personally myself and some of the networks that I've involved in, I've seen e-commerce business completely changed by taking certain trips out to markets like China, like you mentioned, and change the economies of scale in terms of their production facilities. And the only way that I've seen that really done successfully is putting the effort in and joining these networks, but like local chambers, having conversations, being bold, being brave, asking these businesses that may have gone before you, maybe picking sectors or businesses that aren't directly competing with your own product, but have the same outcomes and needs in terms of trying to drive margins. Other things that you can also look like in that space is understanding containers and shipping, if there's capacity to share containers and reduce costs on that side of things. And I think also outside of really trying to drive those margins down, I think with your local networks in terms of who's running those memberships, there's a lot they can do in terms of a knowledge transfer and sharing, whether how they use their platforms, whether they get people on WhatsApp or Discord, but there's lots of interesting things that can be shared for e-commerce businesses in this area, particularly for early stage, around trends. So trends are so important when it comes to understanding all the different markets. And Kerry was talking about all these different markets to think through. Well, we now live in a world where it's very easy to tap into things like search volumes and really understand where things might be trending relative to what you're doing. And then within that, there's going to be different niches depending on what the market is. Like we even see the adaptation of it within, say, stock trading, where lots of traders and funds will be scouring TikTok and looking at what Gen Z are doing and what are they trending. We've seen like Tapestry's stock price go massive because Gen Zs are massively into Coach handbags. But it's all those things of going into these little corners of the internet and then knowledge sharing that back into your network can make a massive difference to how you set up your e-commerce business or make gains and get those competitive advantages. So I think my answer is probably not completely answering it directly, but it's to really encourage you to join these networks, ask those questions, because that's where you'll get those nuggets and insights or introductions to those factories or make those savings on containers.
Fantastic. Kerry, mentoring and new markets, what were your thoughts on that?
I think, kind of the same as Kieran on there in terms of networking. I think that's one of the biggest things, right? And also, as we say, not asking someone to be a mentor, right? There's so many businesses that, as you say, have been, before you that are more than happy to have some sort of relationship, whether that be a online, mentoring type relationship or something more formal, but definitely those networks, and I'd probably say more of the online network as well on there. There's loads of forums, etc., on like Facebook and Reddit, etc., X that you can go on and really be part of a community of startups.
Brilliant. Now we've got another questions come in, and the questioner here is asking, do you recommend using marketplaces in countries that you're looking to expand your sales into? So Kerry, would you like to start with that one?
Yeah, can do. So I think it really depends on the product that you're selling. If it's a unique product, something that is, takes a lot of time to make, or is something that's really unique to your business, then, I think the marketing element of that might be lost on a marketplace. But if you're selling, mass amounts of product and you're trying to move products, then definitely marketplaces are a brilliant place to start. I think for me, the more places that your products can be seen on, then the more reach that you're going to have, right? So obviously you've got like the big players out there, but you have more local marketplaces that are now coming up as well. We see Etsy in the UK becoming much bigger internationally as well. So I think definitely for that reach of customer, then a marketplace is a good place to start as well.
Great. Kieran, marketplaces?
Yeah, kind of similar to what Kerry was saying there. Understand it relative to your own product. Often you gravitate toward marketplaces if you're trying to get either mass sales because you want to get to as large as volume as possible, or you're trying to again benefit from a low cost model where you don't have high operating costs. So you might go into something like an Amazon reseller program where you can take advantage of their shipping facilities by tapping into the kind of European network hub, so you don't have to look after those posts and packaging elements and shipping. However, that obviously comes at a cost relative to your price point. So again, working that in is really, really important. And then depending on the market that you're going to go into, there's going to be certain marketplaces and platforms that are going to be really big in some areas, or in some it's kind of the status quo. Kerry gave a really good example in payments within the Netherlands. I know within like markets like say Indonesia, Grab, Gojek are kind of like that's where you would go to get a lot of products and services. We know in China it's WeChat. If you go to Australia, eBay is the dominant one there. So again, understanding kind of who your audience is, where they shop, super important. But often it can be a really good place to get your product out or help you if you're running a low cost model.
Fantastic. There's another question come in, which is probably one for me to address, actually. So the questioner asks, some organizations used in the past to organize group visits to manufacturers in China. Does the BCC do that, or Mexico, or other similar areas? Yes, well, our members are very active in this, the Chambers Network, both across the UK and our international chambers, British chambers in 79 markets who are in membership of BCC. This is their stock and trade, and they do this regularly, often with UK government assistance and buy-in as well. I'd point out some recent excellent fairs, which the Glasgow Chamber of Commerce did, for example, in Indonesia and Thailand, and some of the CPTPP countries are really trying to lean into the opportunities of this new agreement to try and drive export growth for UK firms. So that was an excellent example, and there are chambers right across the UK doing very similar things. We engage frequently with the embassies and the governments of key growth markets, and we take part in World Chambers Federation and similar events across the globe. So, yep, selling UK goods and services is in our DNA, and it's a key part of who we are and what we do. I think that was the last of our questions. So if I can perhaps just invite Kerry and Kieran just to give us a closing thought, final elevator pitch for what companies can do to seize these opportunities and work to experience e-commerce export growth.
Sure, I'll go first. So I think for me, when you're starting that website, making sure that you are open to 220 countries. I think I've said that a few times now, and it's true. And it really does start you on that global expansion. Having the flexible shipping options there. So if your customer wants a slower delivery that might be more cost effective, but also having a faster express option on there to capture those customers that need something quick or are more than happy to pay for a more premium service, especially with the longer transit times that might be throughout the world from the UK markets. Having that social media presence, so having that community aspect on social media, with the look to having your strategy to actually start selling on some of those platforms as well. And for me, if you're not sure, shipping internationally is not scary. There is, when we talked about networks and forums, etc. There's so many people and businesses that can help you actually achieve that global expansion, whether that's the colleagues at the BCC or us at DHL. We aren't just a logistics company getting from A to B. We really are focusing on that premium experience and how do we make sure that your customers come back by having a great delivery experience as well. So thank you.
Thank you. And Kieran, closing thoughts?
Yeah, I suppose just from a financing perspective, if you're starting out and you're brand new e-commerce, there is optionality. The UK is really well placed with the startup loan scheme that I've mentioned. But as soon as you start to trade and generate those monthly sales, as soon as you hit about £5,000 in sales, there's going to be financing options available to you from that perspective. However, when thinking of finance, it's often useful to think about where the pain point is. Is it at a supply level? So maybe supplier finance, maybe your margins are getting hit from a warehousing point of view. Potentially there's optionality to purchase a commercial mortgage on a warehouse that might reduce margins, or you happen to be on a short-term financing facility like a merchant cash advance or revenue-based finance facility, and you need to stretch that over a longer period. So then that's where you might look at something like a term lending product, or you feel you just want something at the back. You might a rainy day access. You might want a revolving credit facility whereby you can just use it when you need it, but ultimately there's lots of different options there. And I think one thing that I would also say from a financing point that's really useful to think about as an e-commerce business is your FX exposure. Often we see kind of companies making pitfalls by using their bank when it comes to running their e-commerce businesses, particularly as rightly they want to export and grow to different markets. Often banks can be the worst possible partner in that instance, because they're not set up to give you the best possible rates. So thinking about that, what point of view, even if it's just spots or individual trades, but increasingly if you've got currency exposure across multiple currencies, hedging is really important. So if you're doing a lot of pound to euro, pound to dollar, or pound to anything, locking in a known rate that works with your model and your margins is super important. So again, getting familiar with that is, I would say, something that e-commerce businesses should really look to get on top of.
Thank you so much. So can I bring this webinar to a close? Can I thank our brilliant contributors? Kieran, do check out Swoop Finance, and Kerry from our partners at DHL, who strongly supported this great event today. Can I also thank our colleagues at BCC for putting this event together? And can I thank all of you for some really stimulating questions? Let's keep up the dialogue after the event. Do share the online link to other friends who would want to watch this webinar on demand. Let's keep up the dialogue, keep on trading. Let's keep on promoting and expanding e-commerce. And until next time, from all of us, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, William.